Okay, good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, September 15th, 2021, and we are currently back in the Freeport High School Library. Everyone is with us this evening, which is wonderful, so we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Not that anybody remembers this far back, but do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the minutes from the June 9th, 2021 and August 25th, 2021 as presented, barring any errors or omissions? Susanna and Maddie, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? None opposed? Great, thank you. Adjustments to the agenda.
Only one. I would like to move the presentation on MLTI before the unfinished business.
Okay, that's easy enough. All right, we will move on to good news and recognition. So for this evening, we have the report from Brady.
All right, the high school has had a good start to the year, picking up where they left off. Our football team has won their first two games by a combined 77 points, a great way to start their season. Girls soccer got their first win of the season last night at their neon night against Greeley. Boys soccer is having their first neon night next Tuesday night against Freiburg. Field hockey got their win today against Greeley 4-2. And then just overall, the high school's had really good energy the first 3 weeks to start, and we're hoping to keep it moving forward for the rest of the year.
Great, thank you. All right, public comment. I don't see anyone from the public joining us, but we'll give folks a minute in case they're racing down the hallways. Walking, of course, because we don't run in the high school. Never know where Jen is out there. All right, we have another one at the end of our agenda, so if anyone makes it and has a comment to share, they will still have that opportunity. But we will move on to the report from the superintendent.
So yes, I'd like to report out on the opening of school. It has gone smoothly for the most part. Our largest challenge has been navigating COVID. We are in outbreak status at Durham Community School and Freeport High School. We'll probably be in that status all year long because to truly get out, you need to go 28 days without a case once you're in that status. And so based upon how the data is trending at the moment and our data from last year, I do not see us going 28 days without a case at either of those schools. In RSU 5, we are now at 14 confirmed cases. This exceeds the 13 cases that we had in January and in March, which were our highest monthly case counts last year. I'm happy to report that we had 39 participants at our Q&A on pool testing yesterday. Currently, 57% of our eligible families are opting into the pool testing. We are ready to begin the testing on Monday at our 4 elementary schools. And then once we are up and running, we will decide whether to expand to Freeport Middle School and Freeport High School. Unofficially, we have 2,001 students enrolled as of today in RSU 5. This is 52 more students than our October 1st certified enrollment from last year, which was 1949. We still haven't reached our 2019 enrollment of 2012. Because of our COVID numbers, we are switching back to a lot of remote meetings rather than in-person meetings when we feel like we can do so without it impacting the desired outcome of the meeting. So we've got some curriculum nights that have moved to remote. We still have some openings in RSU 5 for anyone looking for employment. We have a math strategist opening at the elementary and secondary levels. We still are in need of 1 bus driver. We still are in need of 5 special education ed technicians. And then we still need a field maintenance worker. We are trying to have a return to pre-COVID times when possible with our teaching and learning. In many cases, it's requiring creative thinking. Principal Gulko is currently working with student leaders to figure out a way to still hold the homecoming dance this year. Together, they are drafting criteria that we believe meets everyone's needs, with the number one priority being student safety. The current thinking is that it will be an outdoor dance on the tennis courts, but nothing has been finalized. Working together always produces the best outcomes, so can't wait to see what this year produces for the homecoming dance and for learning throughout the RSU. To quote artist Frida Kahlo, everything changes, everything moves, everything revolves. So we are ready to continue to change as needed to meet the needs of students in RSU 5 this year. So that concludes my report on the opening of school. In your packet are the resignations and the hires that occurred over the summer. And then at our retreat, we failed to have you sign off on the Code of Ethics. And so that is in your packet on the green paper. And I'm asking that if you would just sign that and then put that right back in your packet, that Jenny will file those away, and that would be very helpful. And I think the most efficient way to do that.
Give folks a second to read through those. It's green-ish. I don't know.
Kind of lime-ish,
Lime.
kind of.
Puce. See, I
What is
thought,
that? What is
I
it?
always feel like puce should be pink. Chartreuse.
Green.
Green. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, yes.
Okay. Administrator and board comments, those are part of our second meeting of the month, so that's why we don't have any of those on there today, along with policy. So those three we will see at our next meeting at the end of September, which brings us to 13 new business, because we're going to flip-flop 12 and 13, or at least the MLTI piece of 13. So we're going to turn it over to Gail.
Yes. So I'm happy to have our Director of Technology, Gail Wolotsky, come and kind of explain what you will be voting on this evening.
All right, thank you. So in your packet, I'm not sure what color they are, but there are two lease agreements that I wanted to explain. I think they may be kind of, there you go, yellow and purple. So one of the lease agreements is for the 7th and 8th grade students and staff. And
Can I ask you to just be a little closer to the mic?
absolutely,
Thank
I
you.
will try. So the one lease agreement, it's called Schedule 1, is for the 7th and 8th grade students and staff at the middle school and at Durham. The other one is Schedule 2, that's for the 9th through 12th grade devices at the high school. So these are both 4-year lease agreements. They both have 0% financing and a $1 purchase option at the end of the lease. So we needed two different lease agreements. I thought I'd explain why. The Department of Ed will be providing an allocation of $459 per device, but only for the 7th and 8th grade devices, which is very different than the MLTI program in the past. Now they call it MLTI 2.0. So we don't get an allocation for the devices for the high school. This year we'll make the first payments this month, actually this week. I think they just went through on both lease agreements. And then the state will reimburse us for the middle school payment of $167,076. The lease payment for the high school devices is, for this year, is $134,001.88. And that was included in the budget for this year. So each purchase, each lease agreement includes a new 13-inch MacBook Airs. It has the cases for each of them, the management licenses, and Apple Care, the warranty that comes along with it for 3 years. All of the devices are in, which is awesome. I was just checking out Brady's older laptop. I'm like, he's a senior. So it's coming soon. Brady tells me he's getting his tomorrow, so that's exciting. What was holding us back from deploying all of the laptops already was the cases. So there's been, as you know, with the pandemic, there's a lot of back order on items. So we're expecting the rest of the cases, which will set up the high school to be all set next week. So I think we're going to be able to get them all out next week. And at Durham and the middle school, they have already done 7th and 8th grade at Durham, and 8th grade is coming up next week. 7th grade is all set at the middle school here in Freeport. So we're just hoping the board's supportive of both of these lease agreements, and we can sign off on them tonight. Rick's here as well to try and answer any questions you have. So fire away.
Folly.
Thank you, Gail. Could you please repeat the MLTI is subsidizing the 7th and 8th devices, so the final price will be $459 per device? Is that what you said?
Yeah, thanks
Okay.
for asking to clarify. So actually, no. So each package with all of those is more than the $459. So they're providing us with $459 per device of the total cost, which I think is around $900. So
Okay.
so they're not actually, it works out so that they're kind of reimbursing us for this year's lease payment for 7th and 8th grade devices. So that will end up being zero. But we don't, so if you were to buy maybe another device that was on the MLTI list, then that $459 would cover it, but it would be like a Chromebook or something. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. And then for the high school, you said that we would get $124,000 kickback from somebody? Did I hear that correctly?
The high school, no, we won't, no.
So we pay full freight for the high school?
The high school, we are getting the pricing, it's a discounted rate that includes the license and the case and the Apple Care.
Yeah.
The same pricing as the MLTI, but we don't get any of the allocation towards
Okay.
those devices.
Okay.
So
Do we have any COVID funds that will help? Are we using any COVID funds to pay for any of
actually,
this?
in the spring of this past school year, we did use some COVID funds to pre-buy some devices. Thank goodness. So that was helpful. So that was helping us at the high school get set up with the teacher laptops ahead of time.
Okay.
So we did use COVID funds last year.
Okay. But not for the ones covered under these two agreements?
Well, so you'll see the amount of devices for the high school we ordered, it's 545 devices.
Mm-hmm.
And for the middle school, it's 364 devices. So the high school, we definitely have more, it's probably more like 670, including
Oh, okay.
staff. So those, to cover the 540 to 670, those were ordered using COVID funds.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Jeremy.
Just have a general question on the pricing. Were there any other options for purchase in terms of making sure this was the best deal available? I totally understand there's a lot of support pieces in here too, but
Absolutely.
yes.
So any other pricing available for the Apple device?
yeah,
Or
like,
any other
or
device?
is
Yeah.
this like the only way to
Well,
purchase in this bulk, or how'd that
If
go?
we didn't have to opt into MLTI,
Mhm.
but it would kind of be saying no to that $459 per device. And it would be really hard to get anybody to sell us all of those things, the case, the device, the license, and the warranty
Mhm.
for less than, I think it comes out to 900 or something like that. So, yeah, so it is definitely a good deal. So it was hard to turn down the money. And the MLTI program, the state does offer 5 other devices. There were other vendors that presented a different type of device, but our district is so used to having 612
Oh, yeah.
MacBook Airs, it would be hard to say, okay, now we're going to Chromebooks. And
No.
it would be hard to sell that. Yeah.
Cool. And can I ask one more? Okay. Just for the maintenance side, are there any confidentiality concerns about content that's on the devices? Like, do we ship them out for maintenance, or do they normally stay in house? And 'cause I didn't see any confidentiality language in the lease itself.
Let's see. So When a device needs to be repaired, then it goes to an authorized Apple repair place. There's a place in Portland that we go to. And they're able to access the computer without getting into the student side. So they're not getting into, or the staff. So they don't actually go into that side in order to, correct me if I'm wrong, tech people back there, right? They don't have to go into, yeah. So there's no need for us to worry about that piece. And even when our team is servicing things, and we can get to it without going into the user side, so, which is kind of nice.
Susanna.
Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about, you're talking about the numbers that are ordered, and you mentioned Brady getting, a replacement tomorrow. Can you, about which he's quite excited, obviously.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what happens to the ones that are already in circulation and sort of how it's assessed? Are students on a system in which they're getting a new one every couple of years? I mean, I'm talking like, I have one at home that's 12 years old, and it's taken me through school since
Right.
however. You're talking about a lease of several years.
Mm-hmm.
Apple is usually known for having a longer longevity than that. I'm just
Yes.
wondering, I realize, there's sort of systems that you want to keep up to date and whatnot, but I'm just wondering what's happening to
Right.
them afterward.
Actually, when I just checked in with Brady, I was like, how come you have the old, so the seniors are getting the devices first at the high school, right, as we wait for the cases to come in. And he was pointing out, I think those devices are 6 years old. So they're still kicking, but they're, getting to the point where they're, and the kids are tough on the merchandise. So, right. So, so we're getting to the point where we're seeing more and more issues, right? We could probably keep going with them. But with a 4-year lease, that at the end, I mentioned there's a $1 purchase option at the end. So these will all belong to the district so that we will be able to continue to use them. I would think that we probably wouldn't want to use them a whole lot longer than that. Like with the devices, the 11 inches that we have right now, they're still hanging in there, but I'm really feel fortunate that the new devices have come in.
Okay, so you're saying that you're basically sort of monitoring the longevity of what we have too. It's not just sort of on a schedule that they just get replaced every so often, whether.
Right, and
Yeah.
the future of MLTI 2.0 seems a little uncertain. There were so many changes this summer. There were a lot of nervous districts and tech directors, including myself, just wondering, like, when are they kept making changes to the program. And, at first they were saying, okay, next year you'll get two new grade levels, and now we're only going to get one new grade level. So they have a several year plan, but I haven't really presented it to you because I don't believe that it's going to stay the way it is currently. But there is some thinking. The committee is trying to come up with a plan for how to, keep these circulating, keep everything fresh. And there will be an option, like these devices, the older ones, we are selling them back to get some money for them. So we'll be able to do a buyback program with these too.
Thank you.
Sure.
Bali.
Thank you. I had a follow-up question to what Jeremy was saying about the repair of the devices.
Yeah.
As you know, parents pay for the repair insurance that you
Mhm.
offer. And I assume that it would be addressed in-house because we were talking about self-insuring the devices. But if we have Apple Care now, what happens to that service? Are we still
Right.
self-insuring? Are we still asking our tech people to do the work? And are we getting anything back from Apple, or how does that work?
So Apple Care will cover certain incidents and certain types of damage. So and we're trying not to call it insurance. It's called a protection plan, because it's not technically insurance, but it's kind of like that. Like the parent will pay, and then if there is a damage, then they'll have less to pay for whatever service fee there is. So the Apple Care that MLTI provided and bundled it into this package is going to make it so that the cost is a lot less. So that's good. So yes, we are still collecting those fees for the protection plan. And from what I understand, last fall, it was really inconsistent across the schools about who collected funds for the protection plans. And so I know all the schools are trying to get, all the schools that have laptops. So the DCS, FMS, and FHS are really trying to be consistent about that with their families and at least give parents the opportunity to pay for the protection plan or decline it or ask for a scholarship if they need to. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, one clarification. So you said that last year parents were not participating into the insurance plan that we offer?
So with COVID, it was just really hard at the beginning of the year. From what I understand, I wasn't in this role at that time, but I think that it was hard for some schools, and maybe the decision was made not to even ask for the money from families, just being cognizant of the situation at home. So,
Okay. And one last clarification. So the servicing that we do in-house and the servicing that Apple Care covers are two different sets of issues. The easy ones we do in-house, the more complex one.
you got it.
Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the other reasons it's been a little more streamlined this year is I think there's a way to do it online as opposed to checks. I mean, I'm
Yes.
terrible with checks anyway. And then last year, like, nobody wanted to touch anything. So
Right.
I think that may have slowed people up. But I know there's an electronic way to do it.
PayPal.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I did it and actually had to call Nancy Decker and be like, I think I paid the wrong school. It said I paid the middle school and I don't have any kids there. She's like, we'll take care of it.
Right.
So don't worry, they'll get your money to the right place.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, I had a question in terms of the numbers of devices. So, if I'm looking at the yellow, right, Schedule 1,
Yes.
for the middle school,
Mm-hmm.
364 by
Yes.
grade seems like a much bigger than our class size.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That includes 364 includes the teachers and staff that teach. So it's not only for the students; it's
Yep.
also for the staff too, and some district level positions too, like strategists or I'm not sure exactly. Maybe some guidance counselors and yeah. So
Okay.
they have it all. The state was very specific, and it's all based on what's entered into the state system, the NEO system. And
oh, okay.
yeah, so they were very specific. And actually, I forgot to mention, if you're really careful about your reading in the yellow, you'll see that we originally had ordered 370 or 370 something, but the state changed the number, and so we had to backtrack. So the piece that you have there was the original lease agreement, but it's just been changed to 364. So everything else is the same, and but they called us and said, actually, oops, our numbers were wrong, and we need to change it to 364.
Okay.
So the revised amount is $167,076 for this year's payment. I believe in your packet it says 170.
170, yeah.
Something.
Okay, so then at the high school, so between what we bought with here and what we were able to sort of pre-buy last year,
Mm-hmm.
we covered all the teachers we wanted to cover and all 4 grades worth of kids.
Exactly. They just
Great.
they're not in their hands yet, yes, because we're
Yes.
waiting for the cases. But the cases are awesome. They're so cool. Yeah.
I thought you didn't want to have to take them back in case we didn't approve these.
I know. Oh my gosh.
All right, any other questions for Gail? Well, this has been a long time in the making, so
Yes.
great patience. I know it's been a while. It feels like it's been 2 years, right, since the
I
last MLTI expired. So
Right.
it's funny that they just ended up
Oh my goodness.
throwing out cash at
Mhm.
people, but I guess that's the way things go. So, all right, so we have two votes on this, one for Schedule 1 and one for Schedule 2. So do I have a motion for consideration and approval to authorize and approve the execution and delivery of a master lease purchase agreement and approving the execution and delivery of Schedule Number 1 of the master lease purchase agreement as attached? Maura, thanks. Vali? Any other questions?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I mean, we're authorizing, but we have already started receiving the devices, so. are they
I'm
up?
sorry, can you repeat it, Polly?
It says here in the closing index that they need a board resolution or meeting minutes to ship, but they have already shipped.
They did already ship. So this summer, in order to get the devices here at the beginning of the school year, then Becky was kind enough to sign an acceptance certificate, which may be in there, and I'm not sure which
Mhm.
exhibit it is, but it's among those 20-something pages. It's called acceptance certificate. And Becky signed that, and that serves as a promise to pay from the district. And so that was, and
So
also.
it's on Becky if we vote against it.
So you brought your checkbook, right, Becky?
Are you ready, Becky?
Right. So they do that, and also having insurance ahead of time. So Rick helped us secure property insurance for them as well. So they wouldn't ship them until that happened. But this is, and in that acceptance certificate, there was also a note saying, not only do we promise to pay, we also promise to send the board meeting minutes and evidence of the property insurance and all that.
And I think all of that came from the fact that they kept changing the process, and they knew over the summer boards don't meet, so they had a workaround of how they can still get the laptops here in advance of the vote, so.
Right, if we had to wait until tonight to order them, then it would
Right,
have.
it'd be second semester.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. She's sweating it over here. Any other questions?
I thought it was just warm in here.
All right, all those in favor? Look how high Brady's hand is. We want it higher, Brady. This is a new laptop. Tomorrow, she promised. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and do we have a motion for consideration and approval to authorize and approve the execution and delivery of a master lease purchase agreement and approving the execution and delivery of Schedule Number 2 of the master lease purchase agreement as attached? Susanna and Maddie, thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor? Great, none opposed. Thanks, Gail.
Yay, thank you so much.
Gonna have some happy students, I think. All right, so now we were going to jump back to 12, unfinished business. And the first thing that we have on there is our work plan. This was one of the ambitious things we had on our retreat agenda that we moved it out a bit to get everyone home at a reasonable time last couple of weeks ago. So this is the work plan as it sits today. Obviously, you'll see some consistent things that we do on our work plan every year around the budget, around the goal setting for the different schools, updates from the various schools. And then there are a couple of the workshops that are already sort of built into the work plan. And then there's some ones that we want to talk about to see if those are things that we want to include in this year's work plan. Do you want to give us a quick rundown of the stuff that's sort of
In there?
unusual to this year? Not the stuff
Sure.
we do every year?
At our next board meeting, I've tentatively slated in there, pending your approval, the enrollment report from NASDAQ. And so he has put that in his calendar, saying that he can Zoom in that night. So it'll be good to hear from him and his recommendations around our enrollment numbers. And then on October the 27th, we wanted to do a workshop on responsive classroom. That will be primarily focused on how the responsive classroom supports the equity work that we've been doing for the past year. So those are the things that I think are kind of out of the norm. And I think that's it.
Okay. And then the other ones, if you flip to, I guess, page 3 of this work plan under possible workshops, these were some topics that people had mentioned over the last year that they thought they might be interested in a workshop. So we wanted to just talk about those today to see if there was sort of board consensus or support for any of those workshops, and if yes, if we could provide a little more clarity and detail to Becky so that she can prepare for those. So one we had was around wellness. Another we'd heard about was potentially a curriculum workshop. And then the third one, which is probably more than one workshop, is the cost sharing. If only we could do it in one workshop, is the cost sharing formula. And then we just put any others that we may have missed from people's, mentioning it in the prior meeting. So I wasn't recalling what the wellness one was about, but Becky clearly took better notes than me. So if it was anyone's idea and they have some clarity around what they were thinking, Molly?
Yeah, the wellness conversation revolved around all the work that we're doing with emotional and social support for students. And that's actually being worked on by the policy committee to add a policy around social emotional wellness, mental wellness. And so I would like to see a workshop of that included in our work, especially because we're going to be looking at a policy, so maybe we can bundle them up and not just talk about the policy strictly, but also how the policy gets implemented and what we're doing now and what we aspire to do in the future.
Mara?
Can you clarify what, sorry, I know we're not supposed to ask each other questions. I'm just wondering what policy that is. Whoever wants to answer.
What policy, what?
Oh, what policy? I thought Vali said that there's a policy being worked on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't exist yet, but, oh, Cynthia has something to say.
Join us, Cynthia.
Okay. So last spring, we took the policy JL, which is wellness of students. I believe I might not have it exactly titled correctly, but it's policy JL. And we added a paragraph in there for social emotional well-being. And then we didn't bring it to the board yet because when we got toward the end, we realized, and Candy, I think, was the one that made this point, that there were not goals that are embedded in there like we do have for the physical wellness piece of that policy. And it's actually coming to our policy committee next in October 1st. You haven't got the agenda yet, but that's one of the policies that's on the agenda. And so it would run through that policy. We've already done work all last year with a big group and a couple of administrators, but the social workers were part of that process. And we really looked at what are we doing and what are our goals for SEL. So that's in play. And tomorrow, I know Erin Dow is the administrator who sits on the wellness committee. She is meeting with the wellness team, and she and I actually had some conversation today. So they're going to be reviewing the goals to make sure those are that is what they want, and then they're going to be looking more in depth at the work that's already been done. So does that help with the picture? Okay.
So if this is going to be a policy, I'm just trying to think of a chicken and the egg type scenario. Is it better for the board to have a conversation around what we're currently doing and set some, aspirational goals where we want to be with those types of things before the policy's nailed down? Or does it make more sense to come with a draft and then, maybe we can, if it's possible to pull something together, by the time you guys bring that for the board to consider, maybe there's sort of a corresponding workshop that goes with it. Maddie?
I feel like I would prefer to hear from the board. Otherwise, we're inventing something in our meeting, and then we end up spending a lot of time on it anyway.
Yeah. That was my thought, but I didn't want to assume that made the most sense. So, so then it becomes a matter of allowing for time. Well, first we have to see if this is sort of something that the full board, or at least the majority of the board, is interested in hearing more about. And if so, then you might end up tabling it at your policy committee for a bit of time until the workshop occurs. Yeah.
I just wanted to add that the responsive classroom workshop, that not only hits equity, but it also weaves into the SEL very strongly, So that would be part of it. That workshop could be
So maybe
part
you
of.
could, that one's it's actually pretty soon.
Yeah.
October, yeah. So maybe that one could just, Mara?
I was wondering if it would also include the MAAC discipline data, or if that's sort of the MAAC discipline data, if we're going to be seeing that at some point, or if the committee is going to be looking at that before it comes to the board
From the audit.
Yeah.
from the audit.
So I just received that data today, and we're going to be scheduling a meeting in the next couple of weeks to review it ahead of time. But I'm not sure, it's up to the board how they want to weave that in, but I just wanted to give you that update since you brought it up, that just is hot off the press.
But that's a good point. That's not built in here to hear from that at all. Did we? Jen?
Just one quick thing before you add stuff. There doesn't seem to be a Freeport High School update and goal review at all. It seems to end at DCS, unless I missed it.
That's middle school. Oh, they're both there. Middle school and then high school.
Are they all
FMS
together?
and FHS.
Oh, geez, okay.
There's just no,
Good news.
there's
no good news. at
Brady
high
brings the
school.
good
I got
news.
it. Okay.
Every meeting, Brady brings the good news. I mean, if Jen really wants to share, we'll let her. So I think that's a good pickup, Maura. That's probably something we want to hear, sort of that resolution of that audit work. So, Valerie.
So does the timing work so we can include that? Because I know that for the social emotional piece, the wellness committee is going to be working on a survey to send out to see what are the things that we're doing well, what are the things that we need to strengthen. That won't be ready by October. So I don't know if we want to talk about them all on the same workshop, then the timing may be a little tight.
Well, if they go sort of hand in hand, we might not have survey data back, but I do think it's probably, a wise choice to do that before the policy work, and we don't want to push that too far off the plate. If there's, I think there's always an opportunity. When we talk about, committees reporting out, you could share, once you have that data on the survey results, you could share that then in one of those opportunities, not necessarily a designated workshop, but.
It feels heavy to me to do the responsive classroom with it feels, the responsive classroom with the social emotional learning, that seems like that fits. I haven't seen the report since it just arrived, but that might, if we put that in too, depending on
I wasn't
what's
thinking the
there.
same day. I wasn't
Okay,
thinking.
so
I was just thinking we want to hear from it somewhere in.
Yes.
in the work
So
plan.
I would not weave all three of
Yeah,
those
no.
things together.
So do we have some general consensus around if we can put some of the social emotional learning in with the responsive classroom piece? Okay. Curriculum? Susanna?
So we had discussed, two things. One is, we had discussed some work on the science curriculum, and I didn't know where that stood. I know we had said that was something not to be looking at if we're going to be looking at social studies and some other things and not trying to accept that there was a discussion last summer at the retreat about looking at that at some point. And so I didn't know if that was something that we'd want a discussion, but throwing that out, but also the social studies English, where that is, if that's going to be some overhaul there, if that is something that merits a workshop or some discussion.
So definitely we could put the social studies towards the end of the year and then give an update about what we're doing. And we did put the science on hold because of the social studies work. So I'm not sure that would be beneficial for you to hear about science
Yet. Jen?
I do think it would be nice to hear an update about the social studies curriculum towards the end of the year, if that's something that's being worked on all this year, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that would be great to hear about that.
Molly?
I agree, and I also would like to request that we keep the science curriculum review for next year then as one of our top priorities.
Other comments on curriculum?
I think in that, when we do that presentation, Mara, I know you've all moved around.
I didn't move.
No, you did. You had some general questions about the role of the board in curriculum, so I think we could include those kind of questions before we then use the social studies as kind of an avenue of showing how that works.
I think that'd be really great.
Okay.
Brady?
I just don't, what is the social studies curriculum review? I'm not familiar with what that is.
So it's part of the equity audit that, we're really wanting to look at our social studies through the lens of, are we ensuring that we're looking at a lens of inclusion and diversity? And so Great Schools Partnership is working with the assistant superintendent who's formulated a team of teachers to start to kind of review our social studies curriculum from pre-K through 12.
And Becky was kind enough to remind me that this is different than when we looked at the math, when we were adopting like the big ideas curriculum, because that's a, sort of a package thing, that the social studies is different than that. It's not like, here's what you're getting. It's a lot more nuanced than that, I'm guessing, so. In case you were expecting that. All right. So curriculum, we'll put social studies somewhere towards the end of the year to get an update on that work.
Yeah.
All right, cost sharing.
That's like a lead balloon.
Yeah, that's my plan.
But having said that, I think we owe it to residents of the three towns to finish off the conversation. I mean, even if we decide that we continue to do what we're currently doing, I think we need to have a vote on it and have a conversation. I'm not saying that we will necessarily end where we are now, but even if we do, I think it'll be a little irresponsible to just skirt the issue, even though I'm not looking forward to that.
Beth?
I'm just wondering if, because our next step in the sort of cost-sharing thing was hiring the consultant, so I don't know if that's something that can potentially hang us up, or is that something that's gonna, I don't know if you have any ideas, Becky, around what that might be.
So I have a list of consultants. I have not reached out to them. I decided to wait until after this discussion tonight. And, but if the board says we need to move ahead on that, I think that was our last step. And so I'll reach out to them in the next few days to see who's out there. That list is now 2 years old. And so, I'll reach out to Maine School Management to see if there are different names on there.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting place to find out. It seems like we were looking for some outside thoughts. And, obviously we're going to have to find who those outside people are. So, Maddie?
Yeah, I agree that that's an important first step, especially because we've had some turnover and we're about to have more turnover. So we're going to have some new faces on this board who've never even looked at the cost sharing before. And I think before we get into a potential rat's nest of where we were the last time we were discussing this, it'd be great to have that objective. Not that we all can't be totally objective, but sometimes people question that. So I think that would be really helpful to have that outside person.
So I just need clarity again, because this is now 1.5 years old, that when I'm reaching out, could somebody concisely tell me what I'm asking them to do?
No, we want them to tell us what to do.
Because I feel like I heard a couple of things that we wanted them, one thing I heard was we want them to review our cost sharing and then come to us with their thoughts about what they would recommend. That's the last thing I remember hearing.
Jen?
That's exactly what I was gonna say, is that rather than, I think, hire a consultant to do, a whole slew of things, I think that was our main goal, was to review the current cost sharing and to give us feedback on, fairness was a word that kept coming up, just so we could know then where the next step would be. Because, depending on if they came back and said, seems perfectly fair, whatever, we could do another vote on whether we wanted to continue, because the whole vote was on whether we wanted to look at it, right?
I don't even remember what the actual vote said.
Jeremy
I
does.
think some options were presented, so it was a little bit beyond that, but then there was not agreement on what option was the fairest. I think. is where
Yeah,
we
it seemed
ended
that
up
that
at,
was the
so.
problem, that was too many options almost, and not a look at the original one and where we stood just with that particular one that's been in place for however many years it's been in place.
So do we want the person to provide options?
Yes, I thought it was very, very helpful when Bill, what was the last name from? Yes, Dogmeyer came the first time, and he had all the Excel spreadsheets with different scenarios. I would love to see something similar to that, maybe not quite as many options, and maybe have the opinion of this third party say, if I were you, I would want to land between here and here. But I don't think it's enough to just have someone come and say, this is your option. And what if you don't like it? Then where do you go? Or if you think that there needs to be a little more nuance? I don't know. I think we have to do a little bit of conversation, not nearly as much as we did the last time around. Yeah, but I would rather have, I don't know, maybe 3 options instead of, I think we had 8 before. But with the opinion of someone also.
Beth? Oh, sorry, Susanna.
Oh, wait.
Let me, her hand was up first, sorry.
Doesn't really matter. I thought we sort of landed on, we were sort of struggling with the idea of whether we wanted the consultant to see the original, the current plan or not, and whether there was the idea of that person independently going over the data and coming up with 3 plans and presenting them to us, and then having that sort of independent idea, and then we can compare it to what we have, but not show them what we have at first, so that we're sort of getting away from any kind of bias or planting ideas, and then have that discussion with how does our original idea pair with what they've presented, and then after they've come up with ideas, share ours and have that discussion with them as well if we need to.
Beth?
I agree with that first part. Like, I think that we should, I think that we should give them everything that we've done so far because it seems like we've all, and especially the finance committee that I was not on at the time, but really has done a ton of work, and we don't want to end up paying somebody to repeat all that work. So I think I think it's best to just put it all out there, say this is what we've got, let us know your opinion, and maybe if you think of something fantastically even better, let us know what that would be.
My thoughts on that piece are, I'd be interested to see how they work, right? What's their preference, right? Do they want to know where we're starting from? I mean, if we give them nothing, I could guess what they're going to say based on what, 80% of the districts have in the state of Maine, right? So, we could. I guess I'd want to have the conversation with them. Susanna?
I didn't mean give them nothing. It was more present them with all the material, but not hand feed them sort of this is what we have, this is what we're doing, improve upon it.
Have in terms of options. I thought you meant have in terms of our existing formula.
No. Give them everything we have, but instead of saying, can you tweak this and make it better?
Yes, no, I agree with that.
Start
Let's
a little bit more fresh, but with
no,
all the existing work and material.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. Vali?
Yeah, I like the idea that Susanna presented. Give the information that they request, but don't volunteer any information. I think there was a lot of friction with the presentations from the finance committee, and we were looking for fresh eyes. And I think we may just lead that person towards what the finance committee already presented. If we say, "What do you think about these things that we already worked on?" So I would rather just ask them, what information do you need from us? We want you to be objective. We don't want to be held to anything that we currently do or anything that we've currently operate under, or things that we have thought of or presented in prior meetings. Please don't look at prior meetings. Don't read our minutes. So we get a truly objective perspective.
I agree. I don't think that's, I think that keeps it keeps the process, I think, cleaner and more true if, we've literally just handed them what they've asked for and this is what they come back with, as opposed to leading them down a path. Maura?
I'd appreciate knowing too, the advantages and disadvantages. Sorry, I don't know why my voice is so hard to carry. Advantages and disadvantages of each if we're going to get 3 options. I think the finance committee had sort of done that when you went through what options and how you landed at your final one. So if the consultant could tell us the advantages and disadvantages of each option, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, when we're looking for a consultant, that's going to be important is, sort of experience with doing this with other districts or being involved with ones, so they could see some of the potential pitfalls of like, oh, this looks great on paper, but in reality it causes that. I think that is, that'll be important when we're trying to pick out who's going to be partner with us on this. So, did you have your hand? No. John?
I just have a comment, and that is, I just have a fear, because of how things went last time, that any thing that's presented that gives an edge to a town is going to be that town's choice on what they want. So I've been around for a long time with kids in this district, so I've gone through all the times where, Durham wanted to pull out, Freeport, all of that stuff. So I just have a very clear memory of all of that, and just keeping that in mind, because I think the bottom line is the money is going to be the decision for each town, and they're going to want that for their piece here. And I think the expectation is that people are confused about how the board works, which we've talked about, thinking that the people that are on this board from each town represent that town. So I think that we just have to be really careful or really clear with that information when we get it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the constituents of this board are the students of RSU 5. They are not the taxpayers, unfortunately, of the towns that elect us, or the voters. It's our constituents are the kids. So doing what's best for the kids as a whole. So I'm sure we'll come back to that reminder. Okay, so I'm hearing cost sharing formula. Next step is to try and source a consultant to help us.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. And then oh yeah, Jill.
When you're looking for a consultant, because you've had this list for a while, when you think about the state of Maine, are there other districts that are similar to us, and maybe reach out to them and see who they've consulted, if they even have? Just because,
That's a good point.
Because there's only so many people that do this,
Yeah.
and maybe look at districts that are similar to ours, and those people, if there are any such people.
Basically, there's a limited number. The last time that I asked MSMA for a list, there were probably 8 people on there. And so a couple of, the one that we landed on last time, that then had to pull out because of a medical reason, which I don't know where that person is currently. But he taught like school finance. So these are, for the most part, we're looking for someone with the deep knowledge around school finance. And most districts really aren't going through what you guys are going through. And so even if I reached out to a district that's an RSU, they would probably say to me, we haven't reviewed our cost-sharing formula, right? So it's not that there's a ton of people out there that do this type of work. And so the other people that were on that list of like 8 names, they're previous superintendents.
But it's not a bad place to start because, one of the things we did do was we sort of sourced all of the different districts in the state that had multiple towns. What do they do? Have they changed what they've done? So I think somewhere in the archives of paper, there may be a list of towns that have changed their cost-sharing formula since they formed. So if I can track that down, and maybe if their finance person was there during that, they might have some insights that we could maybe not be the consultant, but pick their brains a little bit.
Well, and I think the state might know that too. I could ask that question about, from the DOE, whether they know of districts that have gone through that, because I don't want to have to call every RSU, right?
No.
And so,
I think you can see it.
But I see what you're saying, that if the state said, yes, these 3 people have just,
Or Drummond
3
Woodsum
districts.
might know too. I mean,
Yeah.
they represent the majority of the districts,
Yeah.
and I mean, they would have been involved in any changes, I would imagine
yeah,
too. So
so I don't mind asking that question.
Maddie.
Thanks, Jill.
Seems simple, but also not a resident of any of the 3 towns, preferably.
please don't move here.
Yeah.
Yet. All right. Any other workshops that we failed to notate on here that folks are?
So I did hear that we wanted something at some point around just like the update, maybe around the audit and equity.
All right. Does this give us enough to do for the year? I think it does. We are never wanting of things to do. Okay. All right, so the other piece of unfinished business is consideration and approval of the goals, which we did start at our last meeting at the retreat, and I will let Becky take over.
Yes, I think we did review those and we didn't make any substantial changes, so unless there are further questions, I would just ask for a motion and vote on that. I think the workshops that you requested all fit in here at somewhere, so I think that aligns nicely.
Polly?
Yeah, I would like to request that for strategic objective 1.1, which is the one about strengthening and aligning all social and emotional development systems, that the wellness committee be included under a person responsible in some way, because that's a lot of the work that's happening in that committee. And the other comment I had was for strategic objective 4.3, which is the one around, no, is this the one? There was one about the nutrition. Yeah, this is the one.
About the nutrition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know why it says under evidence improvement and assessments collected on district scorecard. Is that supposed to be there? It doesn't have anything to do with nutrition.
Yes, I can go either way on that. I think that
Okay.
we just feel like everything should eventually lead to the improvement of student achievement in some way.
Okay, so
Right.
that was just a flying thought, but the original thought I had was not only to evaluate and inventory major equipment and facilities, but also to evaluate the nutritional content of the food offerings and make recommendations. There was a comment not that long ago, but in the spring, so it seems like a decade ago, about the bag lunches having lost quality and the nutritional value of the food. So it would be, I think it would be timely just while we look at the equipment to look at the menu offerings too, just to ensure that the food that we're offering the students is still held to the standard that we aspire to.
I don't disagree with the concept of that, but I think adding that in is not just a word. It's like a whole separate action strategy. I mean, the equipment is one thing, the contents are another, and I wouldn't want to basically double that goal without, well, first hearing from Becky and probably Aaron.
Yeah, I think that is my hesitancy without getting input on Aaron for that. And again, I'm regretting that I don't have the 5-year plan at my fingertips. Because again, I think we were talking about this at the retreat. This is just items from your 5-year plan that you've already adopted, pulled out. And so I'm not sure if that, I see Cynthia has it. Can I just see that?
Look at you and your.
Oh, my goodness, 2. All right, that's a platinum from those 2. Okay, let's just see, 4.3. So that would be adding kind of to your master plan. So that is, I'm hesitating to do that without Aaron having any feedback on that.
Jen?
I think Valerie has a good point, but I also agree that it's doubling what's in here. But that to me seems like something that could also be started in just conversation about how things have changed. I think a lot of what's changed was through COVID and how all of that food, that whole thing, I think, created a whole situation. So maybe just kind of waiting out a tiny bit to see if things sort of ease out, and if then we feel it needs to be added as like a big goal, do that sort of separately.
Or when Erin does her like nutrition report out, I think, we could ask her to comment on that.
Jill?
I just think with the nutrition program, I wouldn't be comfortable changing this without talking to the director, because it's such a complex, like, it in itself, it's like its own business almost. I mean, there's so many pieces that you have to look at for the nutrition program that I'm not comfortable making a change tonight that affects what they do without hearing from them first.
Oh, and I agree, I didn't mean to just change everything without consulting Erin and her staff. Yeah, but I wanted to bring it up because I personally have noticed a change and people have brought it up to the board too. And I understand why it's happening because of the bagging and all that and more processed pre-packaged foods. But eventually it would be nice to get back to more fresh, made from scratch.
Agreed. Maddie?
The student voice piece, 1.2. I just wanted to request that when we have our administrators come, and I know that starts pretty soon, but if they might just include wherever they are, even if they're just in the, here's what we're thinking, or if it's, we've got 2 updates from Pownell and Durham when we go out there in the spring, so maybe they could give us more like, this is now what we're implementing. But I just love, instead of a workshop on it, I just love to sort of be kept up to speed on that throughout the year. Thanks.
And we did talk about the opportunities for learning for the board, and they asked at our meeting, I guess that was just yesterday, whether we should kind of have a focus, when they're thinking about what to show you. And so we did talk about the student voice piece at those visits too.
So I'm just going to ask a quick clarifying question on that. Is that when they come and present to us, or are we going to have opportunities in the schools again this year?
Both.
Oh, great. So, so for Jill's sake, and maybe Brady's, I'm not sure if we probably weren't doing them once you joined last year either because of COVID. In the couple of years prior to that, Becky and the administration had set up opportunities for the board members to do everything from, attend a staff meeting at an elementary school or see what the STEM program looks like. Yeah, probably not the staff meeting, but you're like, I know, been there, done that, yeah. But, what does a STEM, program look like? What other ones have we done?
It wasn't it wasn't a staff meeting, but at Pownell, it was, I forget what it's called, I'm sorry, but what's it called?
Was it the PLC? Okay.
PLC, yes, where you go to classroom and
Yeah.
the teachers sort of update each other. That was very cool to see how they work together.
Yeah. Beth?
And I think if we're talking about this, the nutrition thing that we went to in Durham.
Oh, yeah, that's
that
right.
Erin did with all the kids there, and then we got to have the meal that the kids planned. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so just opportunities to get out and see the schools and just, be a little more involved with seeing it in action as opposed to, all this paper. So, and really the first one of those that comes up is always the, and I think I just saw the date from Dennis, the building tour. So he does a little road show to see all 6 schools in a morning, usually. I don't have the date at my fingertips, but September 22nd. Did that go out to the whole board?
Yes.
It did. Okay, good. So if you're able to join that, it's always very interesting because you, 1, see the schools that you may have not been in before, and 2, he really highlights, what the focuses are in the different buildings, and you'll hear those things come back usually at budget time. So great learning opportunity for folks if they can make it. Okay. So, do I have a motion for consideration and approval of the RSU 5 district goals for the 2021-2022 school year? Susanna and Lindsay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right, all those in favor? None opposed, great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we will jump down to 13C, which is the budget timeline. I swear to God, we just approved this thing, and here we are with the budget timeline again.
Yeah, and I don't think there's anything, I think there might have been an additional meeting in June, but it's pretty much what we've done in the past, so if there's changes, this would be the time for the board to give us some input around that.
I was at a conference last week, and somebody's like, "Oh, you're on the school board. Do you meet like what, once a month, once a quarter?" I was like, I sort of got in the spring. I see these people every day. So it starts obviously, starts for Becky and the team back in November, December. Starts really for the board at the end of January with the presentation. We then go through the individual presentations from each school and department. And then once those are wrapped up at the end of February and March, we start the deliberation and the Q&As with the public and get, public input on the budget and board deliberations with the adoption at the end of March. We then do our Q&As usually at the different, in the different communities through April and May. And then the annual budget meeting for this year is scheduled for May 25th with the referendum on June 14th. So it's the referendum's a little later just because of the way that the days fall, because it's always the second Tuesday of June. So it's a little bit later this year. So nothing materially different from how we've done it in the past. We will set up a leadership meeting with the towns. Usually that's November, December timeframe. And then the other one that's not on here, and I'm not sure if that's really a budget discussion, but or something that the board wants to continue to do, but the meeting we had with all 4 3 towns and this board, all of those boards where we've met at Freeport Community Services in the past and just talked about not only budget things, but just other big things that are happening in the towns, just to keep everybody on the same page and, you know, provide the opportunity for collaboration if it fits. And so I don't know if that's usually on our budget timeline or that's just something we schedule in the spring, but you know, if that's something that's feasible to do based on the world environment at the time, and this board is interested, you know, Becky and I are happy to get that scheduled with the towns. Susanna?
I was just gonna say, that might be something that would be good to schedule or look at. As I know I heard from two people who were on the town boards who were feeling quite out of the loop with what we were doing. And I know a lot of our stuff is public, but just making sure that we are communicating. And, you know, they said at least, you know, some of the stuff with costs. So, you know, what our budget was versus what they were expecting it to be. You know, some of the things that we were thinking of that they felt would have wanted to have been included. And I know some of that is, you know, what they can reach out to us as well, but it's also maybe nice for us to, you know, be aware of what's going on as well.
Yeah, so generally, you know, when we meet with the leadership, so the chairs of the 2 select boards and town council, and the town managers, if they have one, you know, we do talk about budget and sort of high level stuff from there. Every one of our agendas, I believe, Jenny can correct me if I'm wrong, goes out to all of those boards. So they have all of the information and everything that we're doing. Obviously, they're all very busy people too with their own responsibilities. But yeah, so, you know, that was kind of why we started those meetings, is just to give everybody a forum to, one, get to know each other, because I know there's been turnover on those boards and I don't know all the people anymore. So you know, create that opportunity and just a forum for people to ask questions and, you know, share what's going on in the towns. And so I'm a fan of those meetings. We just got to get it, you know, so that we can have them, because I'm pretty sure the last 2 springs we just weren't able to do it. So, all right, are we voting on this?
No.
Good. Perfect. Okay, now we are voting on this. All right, so the MSBA annual conference is scheduled for the 22nd and 23rd of October. It is a Friday, Saturday again this year. My understanding is it will be virtual, similar to what it was last year. So you can pop in and pop out of sessions right from wherever you are, assuming you have internet access. And I thought that for those who went last year, I thought it was good. I thought they had good content. I probably got to jump into more than I would have otherwise, because usually I can only do one day because of work and stuff. So I got to do a couple others that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. It's a little bit different in how they're doing the delegate assembly and the regional meetings. Folks who have been to the conference in the past know that the delegate assembly is usually at the end of the first day. It's usually Thursday afternoon, like 3 or 4 in the afternoon until whenever they're done. And the regional meetings are usually earlier in the day during one of the breakout sessions. And this year they are moving those regional meetings, and we are Region 7. Thank you, Maura. I never remember that. So we're Region 7, and they're moving those dates up ahead of the conference, so that I always felt like it was a very strange, you know, session, because I wasn't sure what we were supposed to talk about in our regionals, but having moved them a week or 2, actually almost a month before the actual conference, if this board feels like, geez, some of these resolutions we could get behind if the wording was a little different or we're not really comfortable with it, if we bring those concerns or thoughts to the regional meeting and they all go back to the MSBA board with those, what they're hearing all around the state, if there's some consistency around what those thoughts are, they might be able to adjust them ahead of time and maybe shave a little bit of time off those meetings, because I don't even remember how long the last one was, Mara, but I think you're a saint for sitting through it. So there's a couple things. One is we need to select a delegate and an alternate to be the representative for RSU 5. So at this delegate assembly, there are resolutions which are in your package, and those get discussed and voted on and modified and voted on again on the floor of that meeting. And really that drives the work of the MSBA for the year. So our board needs to elect a delegate and an alternate. And then we also will have a discussion around the actual resolutions to make sure what our stance as a board are on those, that we can then send back to the regional meeting and then in turn to the conference delegate assembly. That probably sounded far more complicated than it is, so I apologize for that. All right, I'm looking at Maura because she was going to find out about some delegate questions today.
So happy to pass this off to anyone else if anyone else wants to be our delegate, but I am allowed to both be on the MSBA board and be our delegate if you would like me to.
Okay. So all those in favor of Maura being the okay. I mean, you have to be there anyway, right? Okay. So is there anyone else who's interested in being a delegate? It's actually, I obviously haven't done it on the online version, but it's pretty interesting when it's in person. It's kind of like a really big board meeting where people get up and give their comments and make a amendment on the floor and change the resolution. And if you're into that kind of stuff, which I kind of am, it's kind of interesting and fun. But it is a Saturday morning, 9:30 until whenever. So on the 23rd of October. So is anybody interested in being Jill?
I wouldn't mind, just because I'm very interested in some of these resolutions they've got on, especially the first one, number 1. So I would be interested in doing that.
Okay, perfect. All right, anybody else that's interested? So maybe we make Jill our delegate, and Maura, you can be our alternate in case something comes up. Does that work, or does anybody else want to be the alternate? Everyone is welcome to go into the meeting and listen. You just can't speak unless you're a delegate, and you can't vote unless you're a delegate. And hopefully they figure out the voting thing better than they did it last year, because that was a bit of a mess. Okay, so do I have a motion for, we're going to discuss the proposals in a minute, I didn't forget, but we're going to do this part first. A motion for consideration and approval of a delegate and alternate for the MS Maine School Boards Association Annual Delegate Assembly at the annual fall conference, for the delegate being Jill Piker and the alternate being Maura Pillsbury. Jen and Lindsay, thank you. Any questions? All those in favor? Thank you guys very much. Okay, so that was the easy part. Now the resolutions. So in your packets, it's conspicuously white paper. No fun colors for this one. And this one is a little bit different. This was another part of my conversation I had with Maura today, is if you guys recall historically, we have just gotten really the new revised proposed resolutions. So on these pages, it's kind of page 1, 2, 3, bottom of page 4, and then page 5. But this year, we also have some revisions, deletions, additions, and you'll see those actually up top in that section B there. They've struck out whole sections, they've added whole sections, and historically, we've never seen these adjustments to the resolutions, but they have been voted on at the delegation, so they must have gotten some feedback like, hey, you should give us a heads up on these before we have to vote on them on the floor, because most people wouldn't have even talked to their boards about these things because they didn't know they were coming up. You voted on them as a slate, is that correct, last year? Okay,
That's right.
okay.
I mean, I think I mentioned, someone could have moved to just take one up and change it or something like that. You know, anything could happen when it's on the floor, but we did vote on them all as a slate. Last year, the reason the meeting took so long is also because some folks wanted to vote on all the resolutions as a slate, but other people were opposed to that, and we ended up taking them up individually.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that could happen again. I mean, I suppose that could happen again this year, so we might also want to tell Jill, if someone makes that motion, would we vote yes or no on all of them, and then individually? Maybe that would be helpful.
Yeah. I didn't spend too much time looking at the revisions as a slate or separately, but I think the resolutions themselves, I don't know. All right, so how do we want to tackle these revisions? Did anybody see anything jump out at anybody in the revisions? Jen?
So number 3, which is 2B1C,
Yeah.
where it added, include in-person, remote, and regional collaborative learning opportunities. So I'm guessing that was added because of COVID.
Yeah, I highlighted, well, they already highlighted it. I noted that too. So, I mean, I'm not sure as a board, if, we currently aren't doing a remote option we made the decision to not do a remote option, so I'm not sure if we would be in favor of,
That was kind of my
yeah,
thinking.
of changing it so that, I mean, really, I guess they added the regional piece that wasn't there before, but obviously in-person was implied previous to that. So really, the goal of that change is to add the remote. Brady?
Is it talking about like permanent remote options or just like when a student is like gone for like a week? Because it doesn't seem to like clarify what that means.
I don't know. I guess the way I read it was that it was permanent. But it could be that they were just saying that, there needed to be, yeah. Maybe that's a question we can ask at the regional meeting. Vali?
I think this is a lot to approve. I mean, I don't know about other districts and how they feel about having remote learning and remote this and remote that, and to what extent and to what depth, but I don't feel comfortable voting for that. I would rather they just give districts the discretion to do what works best for them.
Yeah, I agree with that. Brady?
I think that if it was like the short-term option, like if a student is gone for like 2 weeks or like sick or has to be home or something like that, like that's something that is like easy enough to do to put in there. But like I do agree if it's like the long-term, like whole year remote option, that's a lot to put on a teacher.
On districts, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a hand up, Jeremy? No. Beth? Trying to be better about looking next to me.
So I guess this is probably a question I should have realized before, that I didn't quite understand what this was, as we've never gotten this sort of thing before. And I realized that we're not reading the entire resolution. We're just reading the revisions of each resolution. So where is the entire?
So these are ones that have already been adopted, and they tell you sort of when they were adopted.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I
So,
didn't realize these things
I
lived
guess-
on in perpetuity either. But apparently they do.
Okay, all right. Okay, so it's not the new ones.
So there is new ones. There are new ones.
And so the new ones, I mean, it still doesn't seem like it's enough information for me. Like, I don't know. So this can't be, this little paragraph that describes this one thing
Yep,
is
that's
not
it.
the whole resolution, is it?
Yep.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
think it is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, on page, what is it, page 5 or page 4, where it says new revised? Yeah, I think that's it.
It's starting with D, learning loss, like that's the first new
Yeah,
resolution.
I think
Yeah.
that's it.
All right.
So, I mean, we can,
No, that's fine, thank
yeah.
you. I just wasn't sure, it felt like I was
Yeah.
missing something, so if it's all
No.
here, then I'm good, thank you.
you may be, but we're all missing it too, so don't feel bad. I mean, maybe we just sort of take them, the student absenteeism, really, it looks like that's just consolidating two other ones. It has some alternative options in there. I don't see anything that jumps out to me as being problematic. Wally?
I did have a question about that one. Are we gonna go one by one?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, the one about student absenteeism, I'm not sure I feel comfortable saying that we'll report to DHHS kids who don't show up in school. Is that something we do now?
I think we're
And at
required
what
by law
point-
to.
It's part of the truancy law.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a law already.
Yeah.
So if there's a law, everyone's doing it. So why does it have to be here on the resolution? If there's no alternative to that, we all have to do it. And the same thing with another one that we already do it for the teacher evaluation. The entire description is what we already are required to do by law. So why do we have these resolutions?
Let's do absenteeism first.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go through them.
Yeah.
Joe?
When I read this proposed change on absenteeism, the piece that I thought was interesting that they wanted to include is they started to recommend what your intervention should be. And I wasn't really comfortable with that, it like kind of being half outlined, like they give possible interventions. I just feel like those are things that each individual school district and each individual school should be developing on their own, and it shouldn't be a directive in a document like this. Just full disclosure, I am a public school employee. I work in another district as a school counselor at the high school level. And, at the high school level, I know by law we do need to call DHHS, but nothing is ever done. So it's interesting that they put that in here too. I mean, maybe they'll check in because sometimes they see alert, maybe there's other children in the home, but a lot of times when you start to hit close to that 17-year-old age piece, we talk about absenteeism, but at the high school level, it's a very frustrating endeavor. So I think for me, reading this, for me, it's a little bit different sometimes because I live it every day. So some of the language in here, I didn't feel it was necessary, because I feel like school districts need to look at their population and recognize that these students and families are dealing with a lot of significant things that keep them from coming to school. So we should come up with the plan as a district, not have the state telling us what that plan should look like. So if I'm going to be the delegate, just know that that's, for me, an important piece to look at. So if that's not where the board feels comfortable, we might want to revisit that, I think.
So just make sure I understand the part that the mentoring, counseling, tutoring piece, where they're sort of identifying.
Correct.
Yeah. Brady?
Just like based off the way I read it, it says such as mentoring, counseling, or tutoring. It doesn't seem like they're like saying that's like the exact way you want to do it, because earlier they say this goal can only be achieved if there are interventions and support for those students. So it seems like they're just more saying that the intervention and support is what's needed for the students who are absent, and then they're giving like possible solutions to that, like such as these things. But it doesn't seem like it's set in stone that those are like the three things you have to do for the students.
Thank you. Yeah, so how these roll is whether they do them as a slate or they do them individually. Usually as a board, if there's something that is sort of material jumps out at everybody, then we can say we are not in favor of the resolution, and the delegate would vote no on that resolution or revision to a resolution. I keep calling them revolutions. Freudian slip. Just because of the volume of people involved, it's difficult to sort of wordsmith. I think Brady's point is a good one. I think they're just potential supports that districts might utilize. So I'm not sure the inclusion of those should trigger us to vote no on that unless we had other material issues. Yeah, Jill?
Well, the other piece, when I read this, it gives a 95% attendance rate as the target. And, I didn't see in here, often we think of absenteeism as the child who doesn't come to school because of, whatever. But you're also absent when you go on family vacations. So, when you're looking at a 95% attendance rate, that's not very many days of school. I know the research says no matter when you're out, whether it's a vacation or sickness or you're not chronic absenteeism, that does affect student performance. But I don't really like the language of having a specific percentage in there either, especially when the attendance isn't exactly defined what attendance is. And I feel like that's something a school and a district should determine on their own.
Right, so if they're, 175 education days?
Mm-hmm.
So we're looking at 8 days out of school?
That's
That's not a lot.
That's one quarantine.
Well, I don't think that counts as being out of school necessarily.
Oh, really? You think so?
Well, no, I agree. But from an attendance perspective, if you're working from home, yeah. No, that's a different discussion, I think, but yeah, it's not a lot, you're right. Yes, Beth.
I just want to say something else because I do feel like now that we are living in the time of COVID, that we are coming to understand that, people do have to miss more classes and more work and more school, and we don't want people coming to school sick. And so I know this isn't intended to address those issues, but it does, now that you've pointed that out, I fully agree that 95%, we're trying to get away from perfect attendance and all that crap because we want people to stay home if they're sick. So it just doesn't seem like this would
It aligns.
align with that, yeah.
Folly.
Yeah, and I had a question about the 95%. Is that something that the MSBA came up with, or is that written in any state law?
If
If
it
there
is
is the law, it is the law, but
I
if
don't think
it's-
that's in law.
It can't be the law.
Yeah, I agree. But when I read the 95% and then said we will report to DHHS anyone who misses 5% or more, it seemed pretty draconian that we're going to get DHHS involved because someone wasn't perfect.
Talk about overloading their plate, right?
Yeah, yeah. So-
Like you said, they're not supposed to take vacation during the school year. I've done it. It's cheaper. Anyway. But, that's 5 days, right? And your kid's sick 3 days, and now DHHS is supposed to knock on your door? Oh, we're gonna hear about that. We
Yeah,
started
well,
reporting
and
those.
Who knows what DHHS is going to do? Maybe they'll take the kids away to a foster home. I don't know what they do, but, you're opening a door that we may not want to open.
That we don't want to do.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't like the 95. Yep,
I just want to put in a plug here for saying not voting for these as a slate. I think it's important that we represent that it's that one issue at a time.
yep. Much to Jill's dismay, because she's going to have to vote on them individually. Brady?
I think we're reading into the 95 a little too much about the sickness and I think the point of the 95 is there just to make sure we keep the students who are skipping school in school, and it's a goal. It's not a standard. It doesn't seem like it's if you don't do it, something bad happened. It's more the goal that you're striving for to keep the students in school who are the ones skipping school.
Yeah, but it doesn't say that. These aren't laws, right? This doesn't make a law, right, if we vote for this? Yeah.
It's just hard to know because we don't know the intentions behind this, and so we're flying a little blind here. And I think it's healthy to be a little skeptical when it comes to proposed legislation.
Right, because, that's the thing is what they use these resolutions for is to decide what they're going to lobby for in the law, right? So if they're like, oh, this is the resolution, and then that becomes the law, and then, then it's not as vague. Maura?
I'm just wondering if we could clarify whether Jill wants to attend the meeting later this month, and maybe if there's some specific feedback we want to give, or, I'm happy to do that as well. I have to be there. But maybe there's some questions or clarification we could get too, if the board has something specific you want to give either me or Jill.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think the intent is not bad, right? I think the intent is good, right? It's important for kids to be in school. It's important for us to provide interventions to help them be successful so that they come to school. The specifics around 95 is a little concerning, and I think that's a definite question we can ask at that meeting is like, hey, you know, we could get behind the concept, but putting in specific numbers seems inappropriate for us. Jill?
I guess when I read this, because I'm new to the board, when I looked at what this was replacing, it seems drastically different in feel from what the language was to this language feels very different. I mean, the semantics of it, I agree with you. It can, when you read it, it sounds like these are suggestions, this is what we want to achieve, but the reality of what sometimes ends up in the buildings and what the administration has to do to try to achieve this, you know, it's all in how you interpret it. And for me, this language is so different than the previous language. And I guess it would be interesting to know why this shift. I probably, if I had to guess, I would relate it to the emphasis on social emotional learning that our state, we're really concerned about our students and being in school. And I want students to be in school. But I think sometimes it's very complicated when they're not in school, and to have to start looking at being told how you're going to do that, it limits the creativity of our administration, who I trust to know their student body and know what they need to do to get them here. And if here is not where they need to be, because some students here, this building is not for them, then we need to give them the flexibility to figure out. And I think that's what they're trying to say in this language. But I personally don't care for this new language compared to the old. So I guess I want to know more about that and what the implications are of this shift.
I wonder if the 95 comes from the DOE, because as I reread this, right, it says the Maine School Boards Association supports the Department of Education's goal of having all students in attendance at least 95% of their. I wonder if that's the DOE's goal. It is? Right? Like that's the way you read that? So, I mean, that could be, right, so we either support their goal or we don't. Right? I mean, I'm guessing that's probably behind the shift too. So, all right, so as it stands, if we had to vote on what's written here today, anybody in favor of it? Okay. There's no iffy votes. Okay.
It just doesn't seem like anything is like a directive to me. It seems like it's suggested.
Well, all these resolutions are.
Right.
I mean, none of them are concrete, which is, I think, part of one of the reasons we struggle with these every year. So if it's, you know, if it's a vote as it stands, it looks like the vote is no. Maura?
I guess another question to consider for each one of them is what would have to change? If we wanted to propose an amendment to it, would we vote yes for it if like it didn't have the 95%, or what is that exactly?
Right. If they struck the 95%, how many people would then be in favor of it? Right? Are you saying yes, or you have another question? Change?
No, I'm saying I would be in favor if they struck the 95% and the entire last sentence. There's already a law saying that we'll report, but I don't want to emphasize that, because I mean, if there are a million different situations for every family and every child, and it seems just really strict and heavy-handed.
I mean, urging efforts, I don't know. It's not requiring anything, right?
It's also
Right.
saying if traditional communication with parents and guardians is not successful.
Right.
Like you have to.
Right, if you're not getting
you
anywhere
have to
through your
exhaust that
traditional, like,
prior.
do you just stop because, well, the parents didn't return my call? Or
Right.
do you take a step further and try to pull in another I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Lindsay.
Oh, I was just saying, I can't see them just being like, oh.
Mike?
No, I'm just talking to myself, really.
I mean, if Becky already said that there is a law that we have to report at some point, I mean, we have that. We don't have to re-emphasize that. I mean, it's not a concept that I fully embrace anyway, but if it's a law, I'll do it, but I don't want to mention it again as, oh yeah, I support the law and I support this resolution that says the same thing. I don't know. That's my personal
Is the
view.
law K to 8, K to 12?
Susanna?
I guess two areas in which I'm a little bit vague are the fact that, you know, as Jill pointed out, absenteeism reflects students who are chronically ill, students who are on vacation, and students who are just playing hooky. And for whatever reason, you know, parents have to go to work and kid misses the bus and the kid's home. And, you know, there's so many reasons. And we're suddenly now treating, you know, a Floridian vacation the same as a kid who can't physically get to school. And I guess I sort of am struggling with the fact that we're sort of treating everything the same in a way, and then and going into, you know, the suggestions such as mentoring, counseling, and tutoring, which I do read in sort of a little bit more of Brady's idea of that these are suggestions, but on the other hand, I'd like to see a little bit of language that says, you know, communities as appropriate, or something that, you know, clarifies that the solutions should be locally assessed to be appropriate to the school and the cause of absenteeism. And so I guess that's where I'm getting into more of the absenteeism definition about whether a student is just not able to get to school, not coming to school, but, you know, the parent thinks the kid's going to school, or sick type thing. I mean, those seem to me as wanting different interventions and are probably best determined locally.
I guess I don't see this as precluding any of that. Like, I think that the intent is like they want to be clear that having kids in school is important, and we need to be providing supports to make kids, you know, able to attend when they can and want to attend, and, you know, alternatives when they can't. And
But that's not entirely what it says either. I think that's sort of what I'm struggling with. It's sort of this odd level of vagueness, that it doesn't say we want to do the best we can so that every student is there as often as that student can be there, and we'll provide supports as appropriate to ensure that that happens. There's just sort of enough language that's inserted that kind of hedges between, in my interpretation of it.
Maddie?
Could we provide the feedback that it would be helpful for us to have a context within which to review these? You know, because it's like if we went to policy meetings and didn't talk about how these things, why it's coming up. Cynthia always says why we're looking at it, what's changed. There's a contextual framework that is important. I mean, we're looking at this through the lens of what we understand in our district. Maybe this is coming up because maybe there are districts in the state where this is a huge problem, and they're wanting to shore up. They're wanting to shore up what's happening in those districts. I'm not sure that I still would vote yes for this, because I don't think it's applicable equally statewide, and maybe there are reasons why that's happening that they should approach in some other measure, but it's really hard for us to have this conversation with our imaginations.
Because we all know we have wild imaginations in this room. I mean, I guess I'm hearing that there's, you know, maybe some things that would change people. Some vote to yes, but not everybody's, and there's other issues that people have with other parts of this. So do we just want to leave this as a no for this one? Because we got lots more to do. So. And you know, and here's the thing. So September 30th, right, is the regional meeting. There is another board meeting in between then and the conference. So if something earth-shattering comes up at that meeting that you wanted to share to have us revisit, we certainly could do that. Is that fair? All right. All right, so the next one, school board training. This is an addition. Basically, it just is throwing some things you might want to consider when you're looking at board training opportunities. Possible areas of discussion include equity in education, FOIA, explanation of MSBA services. I like their little plug that they put for themselves in there. Board governance, local committee purpose and structure, leadership training, and other items of interest and concern within local school boards. I guess I can't find any issue with that one. And basically just examples of things you might want to talk about. Anybody have an issue with that one? All right, so we're a yes on that one. So now we're up to number 3, so 2B1C. And now we're to the remote question. Anybody in favor? I'm getting the sense that we don't like this one requiring the remote. Anyone in favor of this resolution? Okay, so I think that one is a no, and if you wanted to provide some thoughts on that, Joe, I think it's just that it's just around the remote piece, and that needs to be a decision, you know, based on the resources and capacity of the individual districts for a permanent remote option. So alternative programs resolution. Interesting one for this one is they didn't give us what they were striking. They just said they were striking it and they were replacing it with this. So we can't even do, you know, compare the old to the new to see what they changed. What are people's thoughts on this one?
Sounds vague and nice enough.
Yes.
Honestly, I feel slightly manipulated. Like, what would you guys think if Cynthia came to our policy review and didn't show you the struck out language? You wouldn't stand for it.
It's very strange that they just removed the whole thing. Okay. I mean, because the other ones, they showed us everything they removed. Yeah. So that could be a question at the regional meeting is what was the struck out language? Jill?
I guess, can I just hear again, are these all just recommendations, or are they a standard that we are held to as a board? Like, I am confused, because like when I read the language for this, it doesn't seem as like there's options like the first one with attendance, and you know, I know we do have an adult education program, but the way this is worded, I think it sounds like we as a district, we should have those options need to be, you know, in place for the high school, you know, a high school diploma or equivalency, which I think we do have, but I mean, I know some districts don't. So I just, you know, I'm interested in, like, you know, that's worded that way, the first one's worded the other way. Like, what does that mean? Because I'm confused by that. And I don't know, maybe you have some, I mean, I know we're not supposed to ask questions, but I feel like.
You are
know,
welcome to ask questions.
But it's like, like you said, I don't see this is replacing, but the language is different from the type of language of the first one. I'm sure it's because different people probably proposed it, but it just doesn't seem, you know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of our questions for sort of in general around these is, what's the point? Sounds a little trite, but basically, what's the point? Like, I mean, I didn't even know these things still survived past the year that we voted on them. Clearly they do, because some of these go back to like 1990 something. 82 on this one. 63 it was adopted, the curriculum policy. You know, like, what is the intent of these? Like, are these things that we should be looking at, reviewing, considering when we create our policies? Is this what they use when, maybe these are what they use when they put forth the sample policies that they provide to the districts? I don't know. Like, what's the intent of these? Because that might change how we feel about them and vote on them. Molly?
Yeah, and I would like to know whether these are used as the basis for laws that they propose or support, too.
Exactly.
I know the new ones are, right? Like when they're talking about, like, you know, what they're going to support that's in the legislature and, you know, that, or when they're going to, you know, present something or find someone to sponsor a bill that they've put together. I mean, I assume those came out of those resolutions that we were looking at this year, maybe last year's, that didn't get done, but I guess I didn't think we were going back to 1963. Laura?
I would be happy to get some clarity around that for the
That'd be
board.
great. So we want to know, I guess, what was struck out on that one, but does anyone have a major issue with that one? Is it vague and nice enough? Yeah.
I mean, it's vague and nice enough, but I don't know what's going missing. And again, I'm left to my imagination. I'm presuming that this is their attempt to bring an equity piece in to statewide, to all districts, that's how it feels to me, like that we're looking at the individual student and, you know, what makes every student unique, and sort of asking school boards to all sort of adopt that kind of philosophy. But again, that's just my imagination. Maybe they don't want to put it in writing, because probably there are school boards that absolutely don't want to reflect that philosophy, but anyway, I don't have a hard time supporting it. I wish I knew why.
Jen?
I agree with Maddie. I feel like reading it I feel like it might just be a title change, because we're moving away from alternative programs as a.
And multiple
how
pathways
we're-
is more.
We're changing the way we identify it, so that's just a guess.
Susanna?
I was going to say the same thing, the difference between alternate
Yep.
versus multiple.
Okay, so if this is what we have, what is our vote? In favor?
So I'm in favor if it stays as MSBA urging us
Yep.
to do whatever they describe. I'm not in favor if this is going to be used by MSBA to require by law everyone to do this.
Yeah.
That's why I want to know what is the purpose of these resolutions.
All right, so I didn't count hands. Yes? Okay. All right, now we're rewriting and combining resolutions. So teacher evaluation. So I know Valley has a thought on this one, because I cut her off earlier on it.
No, I already said the same as before, if this is exactly what we're required to do by law. So what's the intent of having this resolution?
So Becky, I'm going to look to you on this.
Okay.
Given that you are probably the most in tune with what the teacher evaluation law requires, is this basically what the law requires, or is this more in-depth than that?
Well, my thought when I was reading it is they're probably changing it because previously they were supporting the establishment, and now all districts have established it. And so now I think they're just rewriting it to state that as, you know, school boards throughout the state, that they support that that you keep developing and reviewing your comprehensive teacher evaluation policy, and then they're just really putting it in words that feedback is critical for all educators regardless of where they are in their career. You know, it's a resolution. It's like, this is what, as school boards, we believe. That, you know, all evaluation systems need to be based on high-performance standards, and that supported by ongoing PD and mentorship, and that the process should address all aspects of teaching performance. And I think you're just stating, as a board, you support that ongoing work. And so I think that, you know, there are districts that have more rigorous evaluation systems than others. And I support this resolution.
I thought one of the interesting things that they took out of the teacher evaluation and compensation one, which apparently hadn't been updated since 1999, so I do think there's obviously a lot of work that's been done I mean, these are 99, 99, and 91, right? So in the last 20 to 30 years, we've done a lot of work on these, so I think it makes a lot of sense to combine them. I do think it was interesting back then. It was teacher evaluation policies are designed to measure and improve the effectiveness of instruction on a continuous basis and consider compensation that recognizes and rewards meritorious teaching performance. And clearly that never gets done.
And, you know, in the 1991, at that time, you know, districts didn't have, you know, evaluation systems that were necessarily based on standards.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is, you know, effective instruction on a continuous basis. Feedback is critical, high performance standards, you know, supported by PD and mentorship. I mean, I think it's just bringing current what they previously had. They're doing with these, what you guys have done in the last 2 years with all of our policies, and just I'm like, oh, this one we got to update. So, anyone have a major concern with this one? Okay. All right, so now we are on to 6. Yeah. Maura.
So I was able to find online, MSBA has all the resolutions in a document online. So the previous one for 2B1L, the alternative programs, said simply, the Maine School Boards Association urges local boards to develop alternative programs that motivate each student to realize their potential. So that was the former one that was struck out but not shown there.
So even more vague than the new one. So they're getting more concise. Okay. Does that change anybody's yes vote on that? No? Okay. Thank you for that, Maura. Okay, so administrator shortage. The addition here is it also recommends the support and reestablishment of leadership academies to enhance this effort. Basically, this is just recognizing the shrinking pool of qualified administrators. So obviously they already had this resolution and they're just, apparently there must have been leadership academies.
Yes, I think there were, and so I think this is just trying to reestablish those again so that people that think they might be interested in administration, then there's really an established program to kind of introduce them to that and then mentor them.
Polly?
So Becky, do you know if these leadership academies were effective or why were they closed? I mean, do we want to have something that was closed for presumably a reason we don't know anything about?
I think I'm familiar with one that I think was, and I'm not sure why they stopped.
Was successful or was closed?
I would say that it was successful.
Who funds these academies?
Well, that's a good question.
It's always the question.
All right.
That could be the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't need to kick money into that. We'll just create our own administrators. It's fine. Yeah. Usually don't have to go too far down those paths to find the money connection. Anyone have an issue with this one? Okay.
I do have an issue because I don't know how effective they were or why they closed or who's going to pay for them if they reinstitute them. So I don't have enough information to have an opinion.
Okay. Anyone else want to vote no? Okay, so that one. The majority is a yes on that one. 7, funding for services. This one just looks like an update in Word from developing the children's cabinet to maintaining the mechanism. Because there must be one now, so. Everyone all right with that? Okay. Do you vote on the deletions too, Maura? Do you recall?
I was nodding yes.
Sorry, I was looking down. Okay. So it looks like the first two, the deletions are getting sort of woven into other ones, actually, and then 3 just goes away because it's going into the teach. So the top 3 go into other resolutions. 4 is no longer required because of the legislation that formed the regional service centers. And then 5 is being replaced by 2 separate resolutions, right, the ones that we're going to talk about next.
So you wouldn't want to vote yes on 2A since you voted no on 2A? Because I think,
Oh, that's the absenteeism, right?
right, so, do you see what I mean?
Yep.
If you want to
So-
leave it the way it is, then you would say no on that deletion.
Right. I'm not even sure everybody really likes the one that was there. We just don't like the new one either. Yeah, Ms. Susanna.
Just a comment on that one. I mean, if we're voting no on, I've got 2 questions. One is, we have student absenteeism as a vote for a no, but we also have the opportunity for the clarification in the questions and sort of what we might support. And I'm just wondering, with the deletions, I don't know if, if these are being voted on individually, if we have the right to, how we vote on one, obviously might influence how we vote on the other. But part of the child safety, when looking at the child safety part of the first, of what's been incorporated into student absenteeism, it's talking about regarding absent students to ensure the safety of those students. And I don't see the aspect of student safety being incorporated into student absenteeism. It sounds much more about making sure students are in school and therefore they're safe, which isn't the same thing at all. And so I guess I'm just, with the deletion, concerned that we're actually, whether the element of child safety is actually sufficiently incorporated into student absenteeism, because I'm not certain it is. If that makes sense.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So the existing child safety resolution says the Maine School Boards Association encourages local boards to consider effective means of parent-guardian school communications regarding absent students to help ensure the safety of absentee students. So that was an existing resolution. It says adopted 1985, amended 1999 and 2008. So that's the existing one, and so it seems like they've folded some of that language into this one.
So what we're looking at by defining child safety there is not child safety at large. It's the safety of students while they're not in school when they would otherwise be expected to be in school, I guess would be my
Right.
question on
I
that.
think so. But you're right, I mean, I don't really see anything that speaks to that in the new resolution.
Excuse me.
Joe.
I would say that I think that's where that DHHS line comes into play, because when you are in a school and you're concerned about the safety of the child, that's when you are mandated reporter and you would call them to investigate. So I think probably they're trying to add that all together.
also-
And that's where you're a mandated reporter if you're concerned about the safety of the child because they're not coming to school.
But we're also talking about the DHHS not following through on all,
Well,
that
yeah, I
system
mean,
not being.
Yeah, and I guess it's unfortunate that that was the first one we talked about, because I think the intent, I can read this and see the intent and what they're trying to do. I'm a little concerned with the language, but then I don't know if language matters in this document. Like, what does this mean? Like, do they pull this out for laws? Then it really matters a lot. If it's just recommendations, and then maybe not so much, and that's the piece that's important to know moving forward for me.
Beth.
I just wanted the sentence that's struck out for the child safety that Mara just read, basically is in the new one because it just is asking the parent guardian school communications regarding to help ensure the safety. And then below, it basically says the same communication with parents and guardians around chronic absenteeism, and then saying alternative programs for at-risk students. So I think they were trying to I mean, in my interpretation, it just seems like they were just kind of, like changing the way, and they don't say safety, but I think at risk is probably what, they were trying to include the first time.
Okay, so are we still feeling like that's still a no from us? Because if we're voting no on the resolution, we probably don't want to strike out the old ones, right? So for deletions, 2, 3, 4. Anybody have issues with those deletions? Because I think 2 and 3, we were in support of the replacement. So that one would be a yes. And then 4, we don't need anymore because we have those. And then the binding arbitration right to strike. Does it make sense for us to talk about those resolutions before we talk about striking the old ones? Because similar to that first one, if we're not in favor of those resolutions, we might not be in favor of striking the old ones. And then 6 is incorporated into the teacher evaluation as well. So I think we're okay with that one along the same lines as 2 and 3. So 5, we'll leave a little mark there to circle back to that one after we've talked about the new proposals. Whew, who would have thought the new ones would be the easy ones? Not having to deal with struck out language and replacement language. All right, so I'm not sure why they don't number these ones, but so learning loss, dropout prevention, binding arbitration, right to strike. So 4, which actually feels like fewer than they usually have, maybe because they had so many amendments to other ones. So what are people's thoughts on learning loss? I'm not sure what the DOE needs to be involved in the work in terms of developing appropriate tools and sharing effective interventions developed by their experts with consideration for appropriate funding.
I wonder if it's a standards thing where they sort of didn't give much direct guidance in the past, so they're trying to.
So they're looking for them to nail it down more?
Mhm.
I think they're just saying that, that they need to be more involved in supporting this work. As you know, that with the COVID funds, they're wanting us to address learning loss. And I feel like we're really fortunate here with our administrative team. I think there's a lot of knowledge. Would you think of other districts that might be smaller and not as well resourced? I think they're just saying that the Department of Ed needs to be supporting that work more with coming out with recommendations about here are some appropriate measurement tools and effective interventions.
So that people aren't having to recreate the wheel themselves?
Yeah, in a time where time is an issue.
And money?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, is that with consideration of appropriate funding, so they're kind of putting that right onto the DOE, saying fund it. or something
make
like
it
that.
so that
Yeah.
it's, capable to be done without huge investments of funds for districts that can't. Maddie?
Yeah, I'd be supportive of this. One of the good things about having gone to that conference a couple years in a row is that you see how lucky we have it and how much other districts are just really struggling. So I would be supportive of this for that reason.
Yep. Was your hand up, Lindsay? No. No, okay. I wasn't sure if you're moving your finger to your mic. All right, so yes on this one? Okay. All right, so dropout prevention. So basically, MSBA supports the DOE's goal, here we are with the DOE's goal again, of a 90% or better graduation rate. I'm going to do a quick pause and look at Becky and ask her what our graduation rate was last year.
I think it was 98%, and I'll thank you for that opportunity. We're aiming for 100%.
Of course we are.
So that's our goal.
So, I mean, I think we think, I don't know. I mean, I think that goal, I think, is a admirable one, right? I think at least 90% of all the kids should be graduating. I guess I'm not quite 100% understanding sort of the second piece of this with the change to say that if they finish in 6 years, that they weren't considered a dropout. Is that what they're suggesting?
I'm not sure. I think I'd ask for some clarification, and I also am reading this to me, are they including if they get the high set, would that not be considered a dropout? So those would be my questions around that.
But they'd have to get it within that 6-year mark.
Correct.
Becky, can you clarify? Because I believe now, if you don't do it in the 4 years, you're considered a dropout.
Well, they have the 6-year completion rate, but everybody is zeroed in onto the, 4-year, right? Rarely
Not
do
zero,
districts.
like keyed in.
Keyed in,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes, thank you. It's kind of like the revolution.
Yes.
Okay. And so I think, I don't know, I do have questions on that. Are they talking about just going to a 6-year dropout rate and not tracking how many kids finish in 4?
Susanna.
I guess I'm sorry, just to follow up, because I thought if a student didn't complete in 4 years, I thought that was considered a dropout.
I think it
because you
is.
have to-
I think this
you-
is suggesting
yeah,
that
So they're giving 6, because, sometimes there's a student that may need an extra semester, or that is still a dropout on your rolls.
Yes, it
If they're
is.
coming back for a 5th year,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, I think this is suggesting that we change that so that those kids that need one more semester aren't considered a dropout if they finish in 6 years. Susanna?
I think I was just going to ask for clarification that might come into that about, is a 6-year plan doing 3 years, leaving, coming back 3 years later and completing that final year? Or is it, from the beginning or at some point saying, I'm not going to complete by the end of my 4th year, and therefore I am on a different trajectory, but still being effectively enrolled, and just whether there's a difference in that.
I don't know.
It says right in it that achievement within 6 years of initiating grade 9. So it's like from when you start
but
grade 9.
It was
you
the
have 6
next one
years.
about the 6-year timeline that I wasn't sure. I thought that could be read in either way.
Oh, I was assuming that both the 6 years were from the initiation of grade 9, but you're right.
I think either of your scenarios would be considered the same, right? Whether they left and came back or it took them 6 years in directly, no breaks. Molly?
So does the dropout designation have any bearing on school funding, or what is that designation used for? I mean, if I'm in the workforce and I got a GED after school, I have a diploma, I'm a high school graduate, so it doesn't make any difference to the employer whether you got your degree in school in 4 years, 5 years, or whether you got your GED afterwards. So what is the importance of the dropout designation?
So if you remember Lindsay Sterling way back when it was like, how did we get on that list or not get on that list? Like when they talk about high-performing districts, that's one of the factors that they almost all use. So they consider it an indicator of a high-performing district if they have a high
But if they change the bar
graduation
for
rate.
everybody, then it becomes irrelevant, right? Maddie?
Yeah, this feels like an equity piece to me. So this is your college-bound, complete high school in 4 years crowd are high performers. So I would be supportive of this, for the student who gets pregnant and has to provide, has to be a parent, or the student who has to go to work to support their family and earn some money. Not to mention just what it, there may be no real world bearing, but if you're labeled a dropout, you feel like a dropout, I think this could be really helpful.
And it also aligns our thinking with the fact that we do invite students to come back a fifth year. So if we consider them dropouts, then we say, but you can come back, so which is it? So I'm in favor.
Jen?
I work with a lot of people who are trying to get their GED, and I think that there is a real, even for people that dropped out, there's a real wish that they could be considered a high school graduate versus someone who received GED's out of the window, it's a high set. So I would support this. I don't think that there's anything that we're gonna lose by offering this.
Okay, so that one's a yes? Okay. Binding arbitration. So the MSBA opposes legislation that would allow binding arbitration on salaries, pensions, and insurance because of the fiscal impact, potentially physical, I don't know, of these. Somebody else should be doing this tonight. Because of the cost drivers, basically allowing someone outside of the district to determine what your staff is paid in a binding fashion. Anyone have an issue with this one? Valerie?
No, my only thought is that a couple of years ago, there was a conversation about this because they were trying to reduce the cost to the districts of having all the different districts have their own negotiations. I mean, I'm in favor of this, but I just wanted to bring that up, that it may be a cost savings exercise.
Oh, I don't think it would save cost.
So if they negotiate at the state level and say, okay, everybody gets a 2% raise.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's
and then nobody
where
has
this
to
one's
negotiate
going.
at the district level. I don't agree with it, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think what this is saying is if, last year we couldn't come to an agreement with the union, right? And we went to arbitration because we couldn't agree on salaries. The arbitrator could say, this is your salary next year. Yeah. And that is a bill on the floor. So. Everybody okay with that one? Okay. Right to strike. So this is another bill that was on the floor last year. I don't know if they got carried over or if they'll have to start again, but basically this is the MSBA opposes the legislation that would give the school personnel the right to strike given the disruption for the kids in the education. Maddie?
I have been thinking about this one a lot, which is why you looked right at me. So in an attempt to speak only once, I took some notes. So, our kids are really well educated in the schools about the reasons why unions exist. That's not something that was the case when I was in high school. And I'm really happy about that. It took me till I was getting my master's in HR to understand the reasons for unions. And I think the reasons that they did that at business school is that they wanted to ensure that, future managers would understand why unions exist and come at it from a fresh approach. I think a lot of people sort of assume labor versus management positions in life based on their upbringing, who their caretakers were. They sort of assume that thinking. The problem with that, to me, is that it's contentious in nature, and I think there's a real problem when we assume the adversarial nature of management versus worker. Just because a union might have the right to strike doesn't mean that they will strike. I think when people strike, it indicates a failure. It's a breakdown of the negotiation process. And I'm frankly, I find it a little disingenuous that MSBA is sort of applying an equity lens to this, as though we don't all have students foremost in our minds. I certainly do, and I certainly believe that our teachers do as well. I urge a no on this. Because, you know, even though as a board member, I represent management, I think for unions to have that ability levels the playing field. And I would certainly hope that it never comes to that. And I don't think anybody would want it to come to that. But I think for the right to not to exist puts unions in a position of powerlessness. I don't know if I've said everything that I want to say, but yeah, I feel pretty strongly about this one, and I struggled with it because I'm a school board member. But I think, yeah, I'll just close with this. I believe that good management means you don't get there, and I think we do that well here. And I think that's what all managers in any industry should strive for.
Lindsay.
I think I completely disagree, just given the 35 states. For me, that's a big one, and also given what our young people have just endured for the past year and a half. I mean, that's just a deal breaker for me. Thinking that we could potentially now have strikes and again, you said it's a breakdown, and I agree with you, but I don't think any of our main students deserve to then have the potential of this on top of everything they've just endured. So I would say, yeah, I would vote yes on this.
Jen.
So I would agree with Lindsay. I think that this goes complete, if we allow teachers to strike, I feel like it goes 100% against what our job is to put kids first, which is to keep them in school. I'm in a union, I belong to one. There are so many different opportunities for unions to make their wishes clear, and I just think that I agree with Maddie that it's probably would never happen, but I feel like there are enough opportunities within a union to leave that piece out when it has to do with our young people.
Susanna.
So I'm also quite torn about this one because I feel very much like Maddie about it. I think that striking is a foundation of civic right and civic engagement, and we are not just teaching that and the big push of teaching civics and what does it mean to be an informed and engaged citizen in this country, in this world, and the right to strike is certainly part of that. And to prevent our staff and faculty from being able to model some of those basic core tenets, I think is quite disingenuous. But at the same time, you want to have the leadership and the management to say that this doesn't happen. We don't go there. But I think to take the right from there, I'd like to see other, I'm uncomfortable with removing that right, but I'd like to see other, ways of making sure that it's not just used because it's a right. It's used when it's needed, just because it has been effective. And, talking about the fact that we do have unions, we do have weekends, we have that's because of the right to strike. So I don't know, I'm torn about this one, but I'm not straight in favor of it.
Brady.
I'm just wondering, what is our current policy on the right to strike?
They currently do not have the right to strike.
And that's the law, right? So it's not even our policy.
We didn't decide it.
Yeah.
The law did, yeah.
So honestly, I don't think in our district we would ever see a strike because we have the means to prevent a strike. I am really worried about other districts that may not have the resources to prevent a strike. And then what happens to those children? they are the ones who need schooling the most if they're in districts that don't have the resources to pay the teachers well. So in a way, I feel as though I would be penalizing kids that are not even under our tutelage, that we are not responsible for protecting. So I wouldn't vote yes on this one because I don't feel that I have the right to determine what happens to kids in other districts, and I fear that they may suffer, even though I agree that the right to strike is very important. But
I can see you have, yeah, okay, Jeremy.
Definitely acknowledge this is a very tough one to look at from different lenses, but I feel like because the law has been on the books for so long against striking, that other layers of protection for the teachers have been built to help not need strikes to be in there. So I think we've got a pretty good system set up currently. Also, I can go back to the 6th grade when my teachers went on strike, and it was genuinely devastating. Sort of the lack, the loss of trust that happened to an extent, because how do you explain to a 6th grader or even a 2nd grader, yep, your teachers they're out and they don't want to teach you right now. And obviously there's ways to explain that, but it was I remember it being very difficult and very it took some time to get trust back with the teachers. So I support yes on this.
I'm also torn, as many other people have said. Obviously, I'm very much care about the well-being of the children, but also view the right to strike as something that is a right. And so I think I would just have to agree. Sorry, I guess I would vote no on this and side with Maddie's opinion on that. So that's where I stand.
Okay, so on this one for me, it's hard. I understand the where these came from, the fights that came before that created the need for the unions and the ability to strike. I think a lot of those situations aren't in play today here in Maine for a profession that is in such high demand that they could, we see it. They move, they change, for whatever reason, whatever they don't like. I think that the function of the union and the presence of the union does provide a level playing field without the need to be able to strike. They have far more negotiating power as a unit than any individual in a profession typically would have. The original unions were not meant for, the college educated, folks that could negotiate on their own behalves and, create great deals for themselves. And, I think where we've come with unions, the need for that tool in their arsenal, I don't think it's there today. Not here in Maine. And I worry. I worry about the kids. I worry about the impact. I worry about young Jeremy and earning back that trust with his teachers. But, to Valley's point, the people where the districts may not have the resources to avoid that strike, and what happens with those kids. For me, I'm going to be a yes on this one. I think we heard from most everybody who had their hand up. So we'll do this, just a hand vote on this one just to make sure, because I know there's some folks on both sides, so we want to make sure we get the number right. So a yes is in favor of opposing the legislation that would allow the right to strike. Right? I know. I know. So a yes vote is to maintain the way it is today with no right to strike for teachers. A no vote is the opposite. Supporting the right to strike, yeah.
Just a clarifying question, do we know why the law is in question.
Why it's in,
Why it's in question. Why is there currently a bill on the floor to change the current law? Is that, I mean, just in
I
terms of
think-
school specific, not in broad? Like,
Yeah.
have there been cases in which
Do you
that's
know?
been necessary?
That seems like one of your legislative update things.
Currently, you know, the current administration that's in Augusta right now is very pro-teacher. And so I think they feel like this is the time to bring it up.
But how is this changing the current law? That's my question. Like,
Oh, because the current law does not allow them the right to strike. And so now I think the school board association is trying to come down to say, we support the existing law. And because, you know, this is gonna come back up
okay, sorry.
in the future, you know, I think probably next year.
Yeah,
again.
sorry. I thought that I was thinking that that there was another legislation to sort of repeat, it's not uphold. Yeah, sorry. My mistake.
Yep,
Maura may know this. I feel like this was on the docket last year and they ran out of time.
yeah.
Yeah. Was it a time factor? No?
I don't know. I believe, Becky, didn't the governor veto it last year? Or like previously?
Yeah, I
And then it
think
came
this
up again.
was like a bill that was discussed, and I'm not sure whether it might kind of be in limbo, where it's going to come back up
carried
again.
over.
Is that what you're thinking, Maddie? Yeah, and so I think that's why it's on here to get, you know, for the school board association to try to influence how that goes.
Yeah, Brady.
So just to make sure I'm understanding this right, whatever happens on like what they vote on this, it's only gonna be used for if something happens in Augusta on changing the rules there?
Yeah, so right now the law is that you can't strike. But there is a bill on the floor that would change that would allow them the right to strike. So I think how they use these when they're lobbying, particularly for something like this, which is very, very direct right now, is if this were to pass as a resolution for the MSBA, they would say, okay, our school boards are in agreement that we want to oppose this legislation. So they would use lobbying efforts, dollars, whatever they were using to, you know, testimony, write letters, probably reach out to the membership and say, hey guys, we want you to write letters and want you to testify in an effort to, so that bill wouldn't pass. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was my question.
All right, so yes is the status quo, no right to strike. A no vote is in favor of the right to strike. Okay? All those in favor? Yes. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Opposed? Okay, so that carries. So that is a yes vote for right to strike. 7, 8, 4. And that was the last one. I feel like we moved through the resolutions.
There was a
Oh,
delete,
yes.
yep.
We got to circle back to the deletion. Number 5, the binding interest arbitration right to strike. So right now, there's one resolution that opposes the binding arbitration on salaries or the right to strike, and now there's 2 separate ones. So since we were a yes on both of those, I think we would be a yes on striking the old one. Does that sound right, Maura?
That sounds right. I just wanted to ask for clarification. When Jill votes, if they decide to take all the revisions together, since we voted yes on the majority of them, would she vote yes?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our no votes were, our 2 no votes were the absenteeism and the remote learning.
Yeah.
you know, I guess I feel like all of the other ones that we voted yes on were sort of like clerical, and if we didn't vote to change them, the intent doesn't really change. So, I mean, I would say the two meaningful ones are the ones we voted no on. So, kind of feel like we vote no if it's a slate. I don't know. Is it-
That's fine.
But having said that, we should make our opinion known that we would rather vote separately.
Yeah. We don't have any of the, RSU 5 is not known for our strong opinions. And that's just on the revisions, right? Because those, they never voted on like revisions and the resolutions, right?
You mean together? No.
No, right.
Last year it was, yeah, resolutions and then the revisions were separate.
Okay. And then, in terms of the resolutions, if they did want to take those as a slate, we voted yes on all of them, so we could. So if that was a motion and you wanted to save some time, you could be in favor of that one. I can't imagine they would, but you never know. If it's 6 o'clock at night, they might. Oh, God. All right, so are you both going to plan on being at the regional meeting on the 30th? Yeah. And I think there were a couple of questions that you guys had written down on those. And, you know, if we get any clarity or updates, then, you know, at the meeting in October, Beth will be sure to ask you about it. All right. So, sure, 20 minutes, yep.
We
That-
should make a note on that.
Yeah. Public comment? No, we didn't draw in any new community members during our meeting. All right, so then I would take a motion for consideration and approval to enter into executive session as outlined in 1 MRSA, Section 4056A, for the purpose of discussing the superintendent's evaluation. Beth and Susanna, thank you. All those in favor? Great, none opposed. 9:09.